Assalamu alaikum, doctor. If you're ready, then we can start the session.
Yes, thank you. I am ready for the session.
Okay, so I'll begin the session. Assalamu alaikum to all the attendants and a very good afternoon. My name is Mohammed Firas and I'll be your MC for today. A reminder to all the attendees to kindly turn off your mics throughout the sessions. Any questions or queries you have will be answered at the end of the session. In today's session, Dr. Siffat Ullah Khan will share his experiences and the lessons that he has learned using systematic literature review during his practices. Let me introduce you to our speaker today, Dr. Siffat Ullah Khan. He is an associate professor in the Department of Computer Science and IT in University of Malakand, Pakistan. Allow me to share some of his key highlights from his prolific research career. He has 70 journal publications along with 15 conference publications, contributing to a total of 127 publications. Till date, he has been cited 1,756 times. On behalf of the Postgraduate Society of Civil and Environmental Engineering, I would like to say we are honored to have you here and we thank you for giving us your precious time. So please, doctor, take over this session.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share my knowledge and experiences of using systematic literature review with all of you. And I hope that such kind of interaction or webinar may lead us towards further collaboration in terms of MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding between the two universities, that is University of Malakand, Pakistan, and University of Technology, Petronas. And inshallah, we will further collaborate in different research projects. Let me share my screen for today's lecture. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's start with my title of our today presentation, that is experiences and lessons learned from using systematic literature review. Well, the agenda for today's presentation is first one is systematic literature review in software engineering domain. The next we are going to discuss SLR definition and its major phases. The third one is phases in SLR protocol. And next one is software tools to assist SLR. Next is updates in SLR. SLR first means systematic literature review. And next one is experiences of SLR conduction. And next is multivocal literature review and future directions and feedback or suggestions from the respected audience. So SLR in software engineering domain. The possibility of applying the evidence-based paradigm to the software engineering field was raised, discussed, and enthusiastically supported at ICSE 2004, as referred in the paper given reference by Ketchum 2004. Ketchum et al. Discussed the possibility of evidence-based software engineering by using an analogy with medical practice, as SLR method was widely used in medical field earlier. Ketchum used the idea of evidence-based software engineering and proposed guidelines for systematic reviews that is appropriate for software engineering researchers. Here, let me clarify a bit that Barbara Ketchum, she was the first researchers in the field of software engineering who introduced systematic reviews in software engineering domain. Because systematic reviews was widely used in the medical field, medicine field earlier, so she wrote for the first time guidelines for using systematic reviews in the field of software engineering. And these guidelines were initially published in the year 2003. Later on, Barbara Ketchum, Professor Barbara Ketchum at UK, she was a professor at Keele University, UK, and also she was my external examiner during my PhD at Keele University, UK. So in 2007, Barbara Kitchnam and Charters revised those guidelines, and the revised or updated SLR guidelines were published in 2007. So the researchers in software engineering domain were using the systematic literature review guidelines that were published in 2007. So that's what I just spoke about. These slides show about the possibility of evidence-based software engineering into the fields of software engineering. So that's what I spoke about. So let me skip this slide. Here the same is about this, that different use of systematic reviews in different fields. So here, if we can say that comparison with SE software engineering field, SE is software engineering field. 1 is perfect agreement and 0 is a complete disagreement. Here we can see that it has a strong coherence with the social sciences. For this reason, here it is written at the end. For this reason, the initial guidelines for SLR in SE domain, software engineering domain, have revised and incorporate recent ideas from the area of social sciences, as published by Kitchnam et al. In 2003. So, what is systematic review? For complete name is systematic literature review, or for short, it is also called as systematic review. What it is? Actually, when those researchers who have not used systematic literature review, for them, SLR may be not more different than ordinary literature review. Because normally, most of the researchers, when start their research, they usually review the literature. So when you review the literature, there are normally or broadly two options. First one is to review the literature using ordinary literature review. For short, we can say that's OLR. OLR, the old method, ordinary literature review method, before the introduction of SLR, researchers were using ordinary literature review. They used to review the literature based on either author search or guidance from supervisors, or whenever the researcher found some relevant paper relevant to his or her research question or research area or research topic, then by using that paper, the researchers look into the references of that paper, and then they search some relevant paper, they find some relevant paper using the references given in that paper, and something like that. For short, for ordinary literature review, there were no predefined rules or guidelines. Whereas for systematic literature review, it is different than ordinary literature review. Why? Why it is different? Because systematic literature review is based on a predefined protocol. That is, while conducting systematic literature review, you have to develop the protocol first, the SLR protocol first. For short, SLR protocol may be a set of rules to be followed, a set of guidelines to be followed while conducting your review, your literature review. So that's why SLR is different than ordinary literature review. Although it is more time consuming, SLR takes more time, which is maybe considered as one of the drawbacks of the SLR, because as compared to ordinary literature review, SLR takes more time because you have to conduct first the protocol, then you have to implement the protocol, and finally then you have to report. Due to this reason, SLR takes more time and also more efforts. But on the other hand, the advantage is that the results produced by the SLR are more thorough and more reliable, or you can say that less biased as compared to ordinary literature review. And this is one of the evidence that if you can search just the word systematic literature review in Google Scholar or in IEEE Explore or in any database, and just type the year, give the constant of 2021, just recent, you will find thousands of SLR studies published, which gives an evidence that those researchers which were previously using ordinary literature review are now converting to the use of systematic literature review. So now come to the definition of SLR as it is shown in this slide. You can see in this slide. A systematic literature review, often referred to as a systematic review, is a means of identifying, evaluating, and interpreting all available research relevant to a particular research question or topic area or phenomena of interest. Individual studies contributing, individual study means primary studies, those studies which you selected during your primary selection of the SLR study. Individual studies contributing to a systematic review are called primary studies. A systematic review is a form of secondary study. Means systematic review uses the primary studies that are published, and based on those primary studies, inferences are generated. That's why SLR is called secondary study. Similarly, if you conduct SLR of SLRs, then that is called as tertiary study or tertiary review. Mean if you put the condition that I will use SLR guidelines, but the criteria will be that I will select only those papers in which the methodology is SLR, or SLR is used as a methodology in that paper, in those papers. So your primary studies will become SLR studies previously published, and you are conducting again SLR of SLRs. So that type of study is called tertiary review or tertiary study. Tertiary, T-E-R-T-I-A-R-Y, tertiary. Okay, why we need systematic reviews? What is the need? As I told you earlier, that previously OLR means ordinary literature review. When SLR was not introduced, people were using, researchers were using ordinary literature review. So what is the need of using SLR? As I told earlier that it is time consuming, one of the drawbacks is time consuming, and it takes more efforts. Then why we need? The answer is, as you can see in the slide, to get more thorough review of the literature. Mean as compared to ordinary literature review, the SLR provides more thorough review, and its results are less biased as compared to ordinary literature review. What is meant by less biased? We will discuss this in the next phase is that what is meant by less biased as compared to ordinary literature review. I will discuss this in the later criteria. It will next slide. It is there. So next need is to minimize the impact of bias or errors. Systematic review is less biased as compared to ordinary review. Why? What is the reason why it is less biased? This is because SLR is based on predefined protocol, whereas ordinary literature review, there is no predefined protocol. Here you are bound, here a researcher is bound to follow the predefined rules, whereas in ordinary literature review, there is no predefined rules, there is no predefined set of rules. So that's why it is less biased. Next is combining findings from different studies can highlight new findings or new areas. Next, can mitigate the need for further trials and enable practitioners to keep up to date with evidences. Now come to the phases. What are the major phases in SLR? If you are going to conduct SLR in your own field, whatever the field may be, you may be field from civil engineering field, you may be from electrical engineering field, you may be from social sciences, you may be from pharmaceutical sciences, you may be from biological sciences, or you may be in any field of computing field or in software engineering. You can use systematic literature review, and it is guaranteed that if you can give, I assure you that just go into the Google and Google Scholar and type systematic literature review in, uske baad apna area, after that write your own area. I assure you that if you search that whether systematic literature review is performed in your own area, whatever the area you may be, as I previously mentioned. To check this, if you go to the Google Scholar and search for the phrase systematic literature review after that, just type your own area. Suppose if your area is civil engineering, let's say, type systematic literature review in civil engineering. I assure you that you will find a number of SLR studies published in your area, which guarantees the importance, which shows the importance of SLR methodology. So if you are going to conduct SLR, you have to follow three major phases. There are three major phases in SLR. First one is planning the review. That is, if you see in the parenthesis, SLR protocol development. Planning the review, in the deliverable or the outcome of this phase is a SLR protocol. In the planning phase, you have to develop SLR protocol. That is a set of rules to be followed, while conducting your review, systematic review. And this SLR protocol will be based on the guidelines, as I mentioned earlier, that is, the revised guidelines were published in 2007 in software engineering domain, guidelines for conducting systematic literature review in 2007. So conducting the review. Second phase is conducting the review. When you develop the SLR protocol, when that phase is completed, then second phase is to conduct the review. Or in short, you can say that to implement the review, to conduct or to implement. To implement means to implement the protocol. In the protocol, you have planned that I will do this, I will do this, I will do this. Now you have to practically implement that one. This is called conduction of the review. And in the third phase, you have to report the review. Report the review means you have to report your findings. You have to report your review outcomes. What are the outcomes of your review? So, how to report the review outcomes? There are different venues for reporting the review. You can use different venues for reporting your review. That may be in the form of publications in any journal, or publication in the conference proceedings, or publication as a technical report, etc. So this phase, this type of publishing your review outcomes is called reporting the review. Now, these are the further explanations of these phases, which just we discussed. First phase, we discussed planning phase. Planning the review or protocol development. So within the protocol development, there are different phases. First one is you have to you have to justify the identification of the need for a review. Second, commissioning a review, specifying the research question, developing a review protocol, and evaluating the review protocol. These are the guidelines given in the Kitchenham and Charter's guidelines for conducting SLR. So these are the steps given in the guidelines 2007. At the end of the presentation, I can also give you, at the top of the first slides, I had given my email address and even my WhatsApp number. So if you can need these documents, I can share all these documents. These guidelines are the references which I used in this presentation. I can share with you. You can email me or you can text me using WhatsApp.
Sorry for the delay. We are facing some technical issues. We'll be back. I once again would like to apologize for any delays and thank you for being patient. There are some issues we are trying to solve it. So thank you for waiting.
No internet. Okay, sorry, there was some internet connection problem due to which we were unable. Okay, come again. Sorry for the interruption due to net problem, connectivity problem. We were discussing the phases in the protocol phase, which we have. Next phase is conduct protocol. When the protocol is back, then you have to conduct the review, or simply you have to implement as you have mentioned in the protocol. You have to follow, you have to implement those guidelines. So here, Salamly studies, study quality assessment, data extraction and monitoring, and finally data synthesis. That is why you can say that when you search the relevant papers using the specific research team you have developed during protocol while conducting the review. Suppose you develop a research string, then when you use in any venue such as IEEE Explorer, ACM, then you have to select some of the papers among these studies, reviewed papers. So you have to select primary studies based on the criteria that which paper you have to select to be included for your final selection, from which you have to extract the data, and which paper you have to exclude. Let's say when you search this given search string in a particular venue, let's say you found 1,000 publications. So among these 1,000 publications, you may the Can you hear me, please?
Yes, sir, it's fine now.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Sorry for interruption due to net connection. Okay, come again. Phase is we were discussing that while developing protocol, a planning phase, you have to follow these guidelines, these steps, and when protocol is developed, then second phase is conducting the review. So while conducting the review, you have to identify the research. You have to perform the search phase by using the particular search string which you have developed in the SLR protocol. Then you have to select primary studies out of, suppose your search engine has retrieved, let's say 1,000 studies. Out of thousands, maybe only 30 papers or 50 papers may fulfill your predefined criteria, inclusion criteria. So you have to select all those papers based on the primary papers, primary studies from these search results based on that criteria. And then you have to assess quality of these papers that is being reviewed by the engine. Quality means you will in the protocol you have to develop quality criteria. That means what will be the quality criteria of the papers? What rank of the quality criteria will be acceptable, will be permissible for a paper to be included in the final selection. For example, published in the journal paper, let's say you may give some higher rank to the paper that is published in a conference paper, or you may give based on methodology, the paper whose methodology research design is clearly designed or clearly reported, so you can give the rank. Anyhow, in the protocol, in the SLR protocol, you have to develop quality criteria. And now, while conducting the review, the papers which are retrieved by the search engine, you have to assess the quality of those retrieved papers. And next, fourth one is you see in the slide, data extraction. Now, finally, the papers which are selected out of the papers retrieved by the search engine, and they are passed to the quality criteria, then finally you extract data from those finally selected papers. And what will the data will be extracted? The question is, what type of data will be extracted? So the answer is you have to extract the papers from the finally selected paper, from the final sample of your papers based on your data extraction form. Meaning in the protocol you have designed the data extraction form. That is from each paper, finally selected paper, you have to retrieve that is what is the name, title of the paper, what is the author's, what research questions you are looking for. So that is the questions, research questions for which you are looking for, you have to develop those questions in your data extraction form. And now, while conducting the review, you have to fill that extraction form for each of the finally selected paper. Next is to synthesize the data. That is to mean the data that is extracted from the finally selected paper, you have to synthesize that one. These are just which are these are graphically present. That is facing the SLR protocol. I think it's text is very size is very small, so maybe you cannot see it. However, I can email you the presentation which later on if you need. So here is just to see the heading research. While you develop a SLR protocol, first of all, you define the research question. Second, to develop the review protocol. Next, relevant studies. Identify relevant studies means you have to search for relevant studies. Next, assess the eligibility or quality criteria for inclusion and exclusion criteria that is mentioned, predefined in the protocol. Next is data extraction. You have to extract the data on data extraction form. And next is data assessment and synthesis. And finally is reporting the review or publishing the review outcomes. Define. Next is these are the questions. Now just we discussed these are the points which we just discussed in the diagram or figure. So skipping to the next. Developing a review protocol. So we first of all you have to develop the review protocol. So what is inside in the protocol? What the protocol document should contain. So to define the background of the study, that is the rationale for the survey, the research question, the strategy, study selection criteria. During the protocol, you have to define the criteria. Mean that when you search the paper and the search engine retrieve the paper, so what type of paper will you select for your research, for your final selection, and what type of paper will you reject? For that is, will you exclude from the final selection? Next, study quality assessment. You have to define in the protocol checklist and procedures. That is quality checklist to assess the individual studies. I mean the studies that are the papers which are retrieved by the search engine. You have to check the quality of the papers which are primarily which you selected as a primary studies. One is called as a primary selection, one is called final selection. Primary selection means you select the paper based on the title of the paper, abstract of the paper. When you choose the primary selection, suppose when 1,000 results are retrieved out of 1,000, suppose let's say you select 100 papers as relevant studies to your research questions. These 100 are selected based on only reading, reviewing to their titles and abstract. So when you see any relevancies to the research question based on the reading through title and abstracts of this, you select those papers, and then final selection is you thoroughly review full text of the paper. Suppose these 100 papers which you selected for your study based on the abstract and title. Now these 100 papers are thoroughly, full text is reviewed. And after reviewing the full text, if you consider that it is relevant to your paper based on inclusion and exclusion criteria developed in the protocol, then you mark it as a final selection. So you have to select the paper, extract the data from the finally selected paper. Next is the synthesis, which we discussed, and dissemination. So moving to another phase is conducting the review. Protocol is developed, just we discussed. So the steps mentioned in the protocol, now you have to conduct the review. That is, you have to, for example, in the protocol, you have written that I will search this search string in the IEEE Explore. Now you practically copy that search string and paste it in the IEEE Explore browser and press the search button and use that in the protocol. So what are the results, outcomes of the search string? Then you apply inclusion and exclusion criteria on that. Second is the problem is that about in the selection is publication bias, or while data extraction there is a publication bias. Publication bias means the problem that positive results are more likely to be published than negative results. The concepts of positive or negative results sometimes depend on the viewpoint of the researcher. So you should, and third one is you are also scanning for conference proceedings, mean the papers published in the conference proceedings. So these are the graphically figure it represents that you see that these are in the protocol you mentioned that you will use. These are the libraries or search venues. For example, in our computing research, we use SCM Digital Library, IEEE Explore, Science Direct, ISI, Web of Science, Scopus, and Google Scholar. Remember that Google Scholar is not a library. It is a search engine because it searches through multiple libraries. However, it is useful like when you use your search string in other libraries, in other search venues, and then finally if you use Google Scholar, it is not a library, it is a search engine. It is helpful. Sometimes it shows a very so applications. When you search in different live search engines, now you have to select the papers. You will have inclusion already defined in the protocol, include and that is means study selection criteria. What does this mean? To identify those primary studies that provide direct evidence about the research question. Inclusion and exclusion criteria should be based on the research question. That is, the inclusion criteria in the SLR protocol should be followed. And for exclusion, it means which paper should be excluded from your final selection. The exclusion criteria is defined in your SLR protocol should be strictly followed. Next, reliability of inclusion and exclusion decisions. If you are, it is better that when two or more researchers assess each paper, agreement between researchers can be measured using the Cohen capacity. But if there is a single paper, then you may other techniques for controlling the researcher bias. Publication selection, you can graphically say that first of all, identify relevant study, automated and manual search. You select n papers, suppose 10 papers, 20 papers. Then exclude study on the basis of the title. Then we got another n papers, and finally later on the basis of abstract. Means you review the abstract, and if it is not relevant, then you can exclude that paper, that it is not relevant to your question, directly to your research question. And finally, obtain primary papers and critically, that is, then you review the full text of these papers. And based on the full text, you can write. Next is the publication quality assessment. Those papers which you selected after passing the inclusion criteria, now you have to assess the criteria, quality criteria. As a means of weighting the importance of individual studies, individual papers, when results are being synthesized, to guide the interpretation of findings and determine the strengths of inferences. The criteria will help you to generate inferences when you perform some statistical analysis on your findings at the end of the data synthesis phase. And you have to develop a quality instrument that this criteria is criteria in this rank is acceptable or will be lead towards inclusion of the criteria paper in the final selection, final sample of the papers. Or otherwise, if the criteria is below this rank, then that paper will be rejected. And in short, you can say that using publication criteria, you can reject the papers from the list which you have earlier selected the inclusion criteria. Now, another step is data extraction. Most critical phase, you have to extract the data. So, design of data extraction form. In the protocol, you have earlier designed a protocol data extraction form to extract the data from the selected papers based on a data extraction form that is already designed in SLR protocol. Content of data forms, data extraction procedures, whenever feasible, data extraction should be performed independently by two or more researchers. From the researchers must be compared and disagreements resolved either by consent researchers or arbitration by an additional independent researcher and something like that. This means that two researchers are conducting are extracting data, So there, one researcher has extracted the data on the data extraction form from a given paper, and another researcher has also extracted the same data on the extracted the data on the data extraction from and the data extraction from the same papers. So these results will be compared. If the disagreements occur, if there is a disagreements between the two forms generated by two different researchers, then you have to resolve these disagreements either by consensus or another appointment of another additional independent researcher who can then clarify that which data is more accurately extracted. Next, the final phase. The final phase is the data SLR is data synthesis. Data synthesis in this step to synthesize the data that is extracted on the data extraction form, summarizing the results of the included primary studies, finally selected studies. The data synthesis activity should be specified in the SLR protocol. Now, reporting the review. When you finalize the data, you have to report the data. I mean, you have to publish that data. You have to publish the data in some relevant venue, that is journal or conference. So this is what this slide what it says about. So moving to next, our SLR, my experiences. What are my experiences in conducting SLR studies? I did in my introduction, I mentioned that I did my PhD from Kiel University, UK, under the supervision of Professor Dr. Mahmoud Niazi and Professor Paul Brerechen. And my external examiners, one of the external examiners was Professor Barbara Kishnam, who developed these SLR guidelines in 2003, followed by 2007. So, and I completed my PhD at the end of 2010. I earned the degree in June 2011. So I'm working on SLR since 2008. And almost these 13 years, since 2008, after passing 13 years, I conducted very systematic reviews, or I conducted as a supervisor of various PhD and MPhil students. So far, I have successfully produced, successfully supervised as a sole supervisor 4 PhD and 10 MPhil scholars, MS scholars. Whereas currently I am supervising another 4 PhD and 8 MS scholars. So while conducting as a student, a PhD student at UK, or as a supervisor or as a collaborator with other researchers in different countries, as given in my profile, Google profile, you can see that. Out of these more than 100 publications, I have 45 papers in SLR studies in various domains of software engineering that has been published in various journals such as IST, Information and Software Technology, published there. Similarly, it has been published PGSCEE, Journal of Systems, almost I think that is Q1 journal, and Journal of Software Evolution and Process, IEEE, and IEEE Access, and so on like that. Details are given in the my profile, is available at Google Scholar. The link is also available at the end of this slide. You can take a print screen or shot of the print screen of this slide, so you can thoroughly check those. and you can download, or if you cannot download, then you can email and I can share with you. And I will be happy to collaborate with you people if you are interested and you're doing SLR studies. I'm happy to assist you, inshallah. So next, move to next slides. So these are one of the this is a screenshot which is taken from my Google profile. This one is 2011. By that time, I was a PhD student at Kiel University, UK. And this paper is published in Journal of System and Software. I think that is Q1 journal. Similarly, this is another systematic literature review that is published in Information and Software Technology. Elsewhere published elsewhere. It's also a quality journal in the software engineering domain. Quality journal in software engineering domain. One of the top quality journals in software engineering domain. And similarly like that, this is another one, and so on. You can see this one. And these are the citations of this journal. This paper was published in 2011, and so far almost 200 people, that is 190 researchers have cited this paper, and you can see the other for others. This is the another slides taken from my Google profile, which are the paper which are recently published. That is the papers published in 2021. Sorry. So currently this year I have published 4 papers, which you can see in this slide. Whereas are in queue, some of these are under review. Some of the papers are still under review, and these 4 papers are published in 2021. Next is software tools for conducting systematic reviews. You can perform activities of the SLR study. You can. However, there are some tools available which can assist you in conducting SLR, which can make some of the tasks easier for you. But remember, it doesn't it doesn't mean that these software tools or apps are conducting SLR by default or automatically. No. You still need a human a researcher to conduct the SLR. These are just supporting tools which help the researchers for making the records or making some things analysis, making something analysis use. You can say that these are helpful to these tools are helpful to the SLR. So these are some names are given, EPPIA and something like that. With given the references, you can check these. There is another one is these are Sumari, similarly Rayan, QCR, etc. like that. You can take a screenshot of these and you can check the link of these details of these tools, that what type of support they are providing to the SLR researcher. So now moving to another point, updates in this is mentioned at the start in introduction. Systematic literature review was first introduced in SE, in software engineering. SE means software engineering. In software engineering domain by Barbara Ketchum in 2003. Later on, these guidelines were updated by Ketchum and Charters in 2007 by introducing guidelines for conducting SLR in software engineering domain. And link of this paper, these guidelines is here. You can take screenshot of this, or you can ask me, email me what type of documents you need, I will provide you, inshallah. So after 2007, and in 2010, another updation was made to the SLR study. That was the introduction of toll gate approach. Your toll gate approach, it was introduced for a search strategy and selection of the primary studies. Meaning you can select the primary study that is introduced in data extraction. Mean this is publication selection. Data extraction, you can replace this word publication selection. Toll gate approach was helpful for publication selection or for finalizing the publication selection phase of the search string or the search phase. So details of this toll gate approach is given at this link. Now, another update, move to the next slide. Another update was snowballing guidelines were introduced by Professor Wollin in 2014. Another update in SLR was introduced, which was a snowballing technique. I mean, you can use snowballing technique after searching the relevant papers. When you complete the SLR guidelines, when you follow the SLR guidelines for search strategy and for publication selection, after that, you can supplement your research, your selected papers with the use of snowballing technique. Meaning you can add more papers apart from the papers that were selected using the SLR protocol guideline, but using snowballing technique. Then there are snowballing, backward snowballing. Now I think the time does not permit me to give me more detailed lecture on snowballing, which is another area. But at the moment, just I can say that this technique was added in 2014, and this aids. This is a value added in the SLR process. And details of this guidelines is given at this given link. Next is in 2020, guidelines for the search strategy to update systematic literature review in software by Wollin in 20. Further updates were made regarding updation in the search phase. So these are updates are given in the paper given in the link at the bottom of this slide. You can take the print screen of this slide for your future use. Another final updates in SLR is MLR. Finally, MLR, that is multivocal literature review, was introduced in 2019. So what is the difference between MLR and SLR? Actually, in 2019, MLR guidelines were proposed. A link of the paper is given at the bottom, MLR guidelines. Meanwhile, conducting MLR, you have to follow those guidelines. So how, what is the differences between MLR and SLR? MLR or multivocal literature may be considered as the superset of SLR. This because SLR is confined only to academic literature, whereas MLR is the combination of academic literature and followed by gray literature. Or in other words, you have to search in both, one in academic literature as well as in gray literature. That's why, in addition of gray literature, that's why it is MLR is gives more results. We can say that more powerful than SLR in some way, because using gray literature, that is some reports, technical reports of the software houses and something like that, when you review these things or blogs, you review the blogs of the researchers or software houses or software companies, your review can be further refined with the latest trends in the industry. And these guidelines were proposed by Wahid Garouzi, etc. like that. Link is provided at the bottom of this slide. So finally, lessons learned. First one is specify the research question. When you are going to conduct SLR, or let's say if you are going MLR, multi-vocal literature review, the first one is you expect to revise your questions during protocol development. A pre-review mapping study may help in scoping research question. If you have not found relevant or narrow questions, you can also perform a mapping study that is also called as systematic mapping study. When you have not a clear research questions, then you can perform first, before SLR, you should perform systematic mapping study, and then you perform SLR or MLR. Next, during the review protocol, you can your team members. If you are conducting SLR in collaboration of 2 or 3 members or 4 members or 5 members, you need to take an active part in developing the review protocol. I mean, all members should work from the protocol phase together so that they can rectify the inclusion criteria, exclusion criteria, quality assessment criteria, and so on like that. Piloting the research protocol is essential, that is must. When you develop the protocol, then should be piloted. Validate the review protocol data, mean you have to validate the protocol through some independent researcher in that area and have expertise in SLR, in conduction of SLR studies. Remember that you should review your protocol from the expert who has already experiences in SLR. That one, he or she may give you more valuable inputs. Next, identify relevant research and something like that. And select primary studies. The standard of IT and software engineering abstract is too poor to rely on. When selecting primary study, you should also review the conclusions. When you select primary studies, you should also standard mean abstract. Most of the abstracts are not written in a systematic way. If you review the IT papers or software engineering papers, not all papers have a systematic abstracts. And if it is not systematic abstracts, so it is not clearly mentioned about the conclusions, about the outcomes, about methods. So you sometimes you may be not very clear about the papers, whether it is relevant to your area, your research question or not. So it is recommended that you should also, apart from the abstract, during primary selection, you should also review its conclusion of the paper. Then your decision, you may take a better decision of including this paper or excluding this paper from your final sample. Next is quality assessment, which we already discussed. Extract required data, which I already discussed with you, that you have to extract the data in a predefined data extraction form, and you can say as a team member properly it should be checked and reviewed. Synthesis of data files, synthesizing the data, final stage. Software engineering systematic reviews are likely to be qualitative in nature. Most of them are qualitative in nature, but some of them may be quantitative. Even when collecting quantitative information, it may not be possible to perform meta-analysis of software engineering studies because the reporting protocols vary so much from one study to another. So another is tabulating the data is a useful means of aggregation, but it is necessary to explain how the aggregated data actually answer the research questions. and finally the review protocol, review the report and validate the report. And that is the end of my presentation. Any questions or suggestions, you are welcome. And again, I am sharing with you my address, my email address, my WhatsApp number. You can, whatever you need, I will provide. You can email me. I will. If you need this presentation, I will share with you presentation slide or the document which I mentioned. Examples if you need. So the time is not going to over. Therefore, I have to conclude. Thank you for listening me and give me the opportunity to present my experiences and lessons learned from using systematic literature review to the reviewers of such a reputed institution, university in Malaysia. And hopefully see you in future, inshallah. Any question, you are welcome.
Thank you, Doctor, for your enlightening session. Now, for any questions or queries, please do raise your hand or type in the chat box for any questions. When you raise your hand, one of the members will unmute you and you can ask your questions. So, any questions from any of the attendees? Yes, Doctor, we have a question here from Umar. He's asking, what is grey literature?
Okay, well, grey literature means the literature that is not published in a peer-reviewed journal or conference. An example may be technical report or a blog report which has been published in a peer-reviewed journal or conference. That is called, and that is an example of grey literature.
I hope that answered your question. We are waiting for others to type in. I think it is taking them some time to process all the information they just heard. Yes, Doctor, we have another question from Umar. He's asking, what is the difference between grey literature and academic literature? Sorry, Doctor, did you hear the question? Excuse me, doctor. Am I audible to you?
Yes, please.
Yes, the question asked was, what is the difference between grey literature and academic literature?
Sorry, what is academic literature?
He's asking about the differences between grey literature and academic literature.
Okay, well, academic literature is the literature that is published are available at the libraries, standard libraries, such as IEEE Explorer, as I mentioned, the venue's name, IEEE Explorer, ACM, and Science Direct, Web of Science. These are called academic literature. And the grey literature, which is suppose the technical report that is available at the website of any organization, suppose a monthly report or a progress report, activity reports of the various companies which they upload to their own website, which has not been independently reviewed or published by any standard publisher. So that becomes grey literature, and academic literature that is available in the academic, published in academic journals or academic conference proceedings. So this is the difference between academic literature and grey literature.
Okay, there's another question, Doctor. He's asking, is the source of primary data, can they focus on only one database like Scopus, or it must be more than one?
Actually, you have to define or mention the number of databases due protocol, SLR protocol. You have to mention that I have to search to suppose these databases. So it depends on your area and depends on your resources and time constraints and limitations. If you focus on only one, suppose Scopus, then you may write in limitation section of the paper, you must write in the limitation section that the SLR is based on, the finding is based on only Scopus results of the database. You can do that, but you have to write in the limitation. The most in most SLR studies, they follow 4 to 5 standard databases for searching the relevant literature. Okay, I think this will be welcome.
Yes, Doctor. There's another question asking, how long does it take to do a comprehensive SLR?
It depends on your commitment and the participants, the researchers that are participating in the SLR. If they are committed, they can give more time. Or let's say they are PhD students, they are all committed only to research. They have not other activities like for a professor. They have other activities of teaching, management, and something like that. But if you are a PhD student, then it takes, if you are a full-time PhD student, it takes from 3 to 5 time. A complete comprehensive SLR till your finalization of your SLR findings, it takes minimum 3 months and maximum 5 months. Normally from 3 months to 5 months time it takes for a PhD researcher who is fully committed and full-time PhD student. And for a professor, it depends on his or her engagements, how much he or she has the other activities. That's why it may take up to 1 year time, maybe. Depends on the time the professor may give to SLR's studies.
We don't have any further questions. I would encourage the attendees to unmute their mic and ask the questions if there are any.
Okay, anyhow, I have now time for another engagement. I have a lecture.
Okay,
and
Doctor, so thank you for blessing us with your presence, and we were honored to have you. The session was very informative, and we would like to invite you again sometime in the future.
Inshallah, inshallah. Welcome. I am always available to for research collaboration. And thank you all the participants for listening me. Thank you all. Allah Hafiz. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum, Doctor.
Wa alaikum salam.
Thank you very much.